The envelope trembled in Ezra's hands, its edges worn from days of being clutched, folded, and shoved into his jacket pocket. Tonight, at his parents' 30th anniversary party, he planned to slip it to Liam, the man who'd stolen his heart in a way he never thought possible. But as the Chicago loft buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, Ezra's pulse thundered with a secret he wasn't ready to share not with his family. Not yet. The room was alive with celebration. Golden lights spilled through the loft's tall windows, painting the hardwood floors in hues of amber and rose. Guests milled about, their voices weaving a tapestry of stories about his parents, Ruth and David, whose love had weathered decades. Ezra stood near the dessert table, his hazel eyes scanning the crowd for Liam, his best friend, his everything, the man who'd turned his world upside down with a single, reckless kiss 6 months ago. Ezra's mother, Ruth, a petite woman with silver-streaked curls, caught his eye and waved him over. "Ezra, sweetheart, come help with the gifts," she called, her voice warm but insistent. He forced a smile, tucking the envelope deeper into his pocket. The letter inside wasn't just words, it was a confession, a raw outpouring of love he'd written for Liam after sleepless nights of doubt and longing. Giving it to him tonight felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying. He wove through the crowd, past his uncle's booming laugh and his cousin's animated retelling of a family camping trip. The loft smelled of lavender and roasted figs, a nod to his parents' first date at a farmer's market. Ezra's chest tightened as he spotted Liam across the room, his colorful scarf a splash of defiance against the muted tones of the party. Liam was laughing with a group of Ruth's co-workers, his easy charm drawing smiles like moths to a flame. Ezra's heart ached with the weight of what he felt, what he couldn't say aloud to anyone but Liam. "Ezra." Liam's voice cut through the noise, bright and teasing. He broke away from the group, his dark eyes locking onto Ezra's with a warmth that made the room feel smaller, safer. "You look like you're plotting a heist. What's up?" Ezra's laugh came out shaky. "Just surviving the family chaos." He gestured vaguely at the crowd, his fingers brushing the envelope. Liam tilted his head, sensing the shift in Ezra's mood but not pressing. That was Liam always knowing when to wait, when to push. It was one of the 1,000 reasons Ezra had fallen for him. They'd met 2 years ago at a community theater workshop in Wicker Park, both roped in by mutual friends. Ezra, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking, had been drawn to Liam's fearless energy. Liam was a poet and barista, his life a patchwork of open mic nights and late-night conversations about art and identity. Their friendship had blossomed into something deeper one rainy evening, when Liam had leaned across a diner table, his lips meeting Ezra's in a moment that felt like a lightning strike. Now, standing in the midst of his parents' milestone, Ezra felt the weight of his secret like a stone. He was 27, successful, loved by his family but terrified of what they'd think if they knew he was gay. His parents were progressive, sure, but growing up in a tight-knit Jewish community in Evanston, he'd heard enough whispers about tradition to make him wary. The letter was his first step toward freedom, a way to tell Liam he was ready to stop hiding, to be all in. But giving it to him here, surrounded by family, felt like walking a tightrope. "Ezra, the gifts." Ruth called again, this time from the center of the room where a table overflowed with wrapped boxes and cards. Ezra's heart lurched. He'd promised to help organize the gifts, but the envelope in his pocket felt like a ticking bomb. He glanced at Liam, who raised an eyebrow, sensing his hesitation. "Go on," Liam said, nudging him gently. "I'll save you a slice of that fig tart." Ezra nodded, forcing his legs to move. He reached the gift table, where his father, David, was already sorting through cards with his usual meticulous care. David's glasses perched low on his nose, his gray hair catching the light as he grinned at Ezra. You're late to the party. Kiddo. Too busy daydreaming. Something like that. Ezra mumbled, his fingers tightening around the envelope. He meant to set it aside, to slip it to Liam later. But in his nervous haze, he pulled it out with a stack of cards and handed it to his father. Here, add this to the pile. David took the envelope without a second glance, tossing it onto the table with the others. Ezra's stomach dropped. He opened his mouth to correct the mistake, but Ruth was already calling for everyone's attention, her voice cutting through the chatter. All right, everyone, she announced, clapping her hands. Time for the toast and the gifts. David, let's start with the cards. Ezra froze, his pulse roaring in his ears. The envelope, his envelope, addressed to Liam in his own jagged handwriting, was now buried among the anniversary cards. He lunged toward the table, but David was already picking up the stack, flipping through them with a smile. Let's see what sweet words we've got here, David said, his voice full of warmth. He picked up Ezra's envelope, squinting at the name. To Liam. Huh, must be a mix-up. The room went silent. Or maybe it was just Ezra's world narrowing to a pinpoint. He felt Liam's gaze on him, curious but unaware. Ezra's voice caught in his throat as David tore open the envelope, pulling out the letter. The letter meant for Liam. The letter that laid bare Ezra's heart, his truth, his love. Dad. Wait, Ezra choked out. But it was too late. David's eyes scanned the first few lines, and his smile faltered. Liam, I've been scared to say this out loud, but I love you. I've loved you since that night in the diner, and I'm done hiding who I am. David's voice trailed off, the words hanging heavy in the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, every eye turning to Ezra. Ezra's knees buckled. He wanted to run, to vanish, but Liam was there, stepping closer, his hand brushing Ezra's arm. Ezra, Liam whispered, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Is this? Ezra couldn't meet his eyes. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. The letter was out, his secret exposed, and the anniversary party his parents' moment was now a stage for his unintended coming out. The silence stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. Ezra's face burned, his breath shallow as he stood rooted to the spot, the weight of every gaze pinning him in place. Liam's hand lingered on his arm, a quiet anchor in the storm of his unraveling world. David cleared his throat, the letter still clutched in his hands. His expression was unreadable, a mix of confusion and something softer, something Ezra couldn't name. Ruth stepped forward, her eyes darting between her husband and her son, sensing the gravity of the moment. David, she said softly, maybe we should. No, Ezra interrupted, his voice cracking but firm. It's out. Let it be out. He wasn't sure where the words came from, but they spilled from him like water breaking a dam. He turned to Liam, whose dark eyes were wide with shock but brimming with something warm, something like hope. Ezra, Liam said again, his voice low, meant only for him. You don't have to do this now. But Ezra shook his head, his chest heaving. I do. I can't keep running from it. He faced his parents, the crowd blurring into the background. That letter, it's mine. I wrote it for Liam. Because I love him. Because I'm gay. The words hung in the air, raw and unshackled. A murmur rippled through the guests, some surprised, some curious, a few uncomfortable. Ezra's cousin, Maya, gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth, but her eyes were kind. His uncle, always the loudest at family gatherings, stood silent for once, his beer bottle forgotten in his hand. Ruth's face softened, her eyes glistening. She took a step toward Ezra, but David spoke first, his voice steady but thick. Ezra, why didn't you tell us? There was no anger in his tone, only a quiet hurt that cut deeper than any judgment could have. I was scared, Ezra admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how you'd take it. I didn't want to ruin tonight. He gestured weakly at the banner overhead. The flowers. The joy he'd inadvertently shattered. This was supposed to be about you. Ruth crossed the room in 3 quick strides, pulling Ezra into a hug that smelled of her familiar lavender perfume. Oh, honey, she murmured into his shoulder. You could never ruin this. You're our son. Ezra's throat tightened, tears stinging his eyes. He hadn't expected this and dared hope for it. He felt Liam's presence beside him, a steady warmth, and when he pulled back from his mother's embrace, he saw Liam holding the letter, his fingers tracing the words Ezra had poured his soul into. Can I read it? Liam asked, his voice gentle but urgent. Ezra nodded, his heart pounding. Liam stepped away, finding a quiet corner near the windows, his eyes scanning the pages. Ezra watched, every second an eternity, as Liam's expression shifted surprise, tenderness, and something deeper, something that made Ezra's chest ache. David joined Ruth, his hand resting on her shoulder as they watched Ezra. We should have made it clearer, David said, his voice low. We love you, Ezra. All of you. Always have. Ezra swallowed hard, the weight of their acceptance sinking in. But the room wasn't just his parents. There were cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, people he'd known his whole life, people whose reactions he couldn't predict. He braced himself for the whispers, the sideways glances. But instead, Maya stepped forward, her smile wide. About time, Ezra, she teased, breaking the tension. I was wondering when you'd introduce us to your boyfriend. A few guests chuckled, and the air felt lighter, like a storm passing. Liam returned, the letter folded carefully in his hands. His eyes were bright, his voice soft but clear. This is beautiful, Ezra. You're beautiful. He paused, glancing at the crowd, then back at Ezra. Can I kiss you? Right here. Right now. Ezra's breath caught. He'd spent so long hiding, so long fearing this moment. But Liam's question was a lifeline. He nodded, and Liam leaned in, his lips meeting Ezra's in a kiss that was soft, certain, and unapologetic. The room erupted in a mix of cheers and gasps. But Ezra didn't care. For the first time, he felt free. The party resumed, the music swelling as guests returned to their conversations, some stealing glances at Ezra and Liam, others offering quiet smiles of support. Ruth and David moved to open the rest of the gifts, but Ezra could feel their eyes on him, full of pride and love. He and Liam found a quiet spot by the dessert table, the letter now a shared secret between them. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Ezra said, his voice low. I was going to give it to you later, somewhere private. Liam grinned, his scarf catching the light. I'm glad it happened. This, he held up the letter. This is you being brave. And I love you for it. Ezra's heart skipped. You love me. Liam's laugh was soft, his eyes crinkling. Yeah, Ezra. I do. I've been waiting for you to catch up. They stood there, the party humming around them. And for the first time, Ezra felt like he belonged not just in the room, but in his own skin. But the night wasn't over, and the letter's accidental reveal was only the beginning. There were still conversations to be had, bridges to mend, and a love to build, one that was no longer a secret. The party's rhythm returned, but Ezra felt like he was floating, untethered from the weight he'd carried for years. Liam's hand brushed his, a quiet promise as they stood by the dessert table, the fig tart untouched between them. The letter, now tucked into Liam's pocket, felt like a living thing, its words binding them closer even as the crowd swirled around them. Ruth and David were back at the center of the room, laughing as they opened a card from their old neighbors. But Ezra caught his mother's glance, her eyes soft with unspoken questions. He knew this wasn't the end of the conversation, just the start. The acceptance he'd felt in their embrace was real, but he braced for the deeper talks, the ones that would come when the music faded and the guests went home. Liam leaned closer, his voice a warm murmur. "You okay?" That was a lot. Ezra nodded, though his heart still raced. "I think so. I just didn't expect it to feel like this, like I'm lighter, but also terrified." He glanced at the crowd, catching a few curious looks. "Not everyone's going to be as cool as my parents." Liam's smile was steady, unshaken. "Let them stare. You just changed the game. Ezra, you're out, and you're still standing. That's huge." Ezra wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at the edges of his relief. His family was one thing, but the world beyond this loft, his coworkers, his community, the life he'd built felt like a minefield. He'd heard stories of rejection, of families fractured over truths like his. Even in progressive Chicago, not everyone embraced change. Maya approached, a glass of wine in hand, her grin mischievous. "So, Liam," she said, ignoring Ezra's blush, "how long have you two been a thing? And why am I just finding out now?" Liam laughed, his ease disarming. 6 months, give or take. And blame your cousin's been keeping me under wraps." Ezra groaned, but Maya's teasing felt like a gift, a sign that not everything would shift. "I was going to tell you," he said, nudging her. "Eventually." "Uh-huh," Maya said, winking. "Well, you owe me details. And Liam, you're officially invited to game night. No backing out." As Maya drifted back to the crowd, Ezra felt a flicker of normalcy. But then he noticed his uncle, Joel, standing by the bar, his expression unreadable. Joel was the family's traditionalist, the one who'd once argued against same-sex marriage at a Passover dinner, citing values. Ezra's stomach twisted. He hadn't considered Joel when he'd written the letter, hadn't thought about the ripple effects of his truth. Liam followed his gaze. "Is that the uncle who thinks the internet is a fad?" Ezra snorted, grateful for the levity. "Yeah. He's old school. I don't know what he's thinking right now." "Wanting to talk to him?" Liam offered, half serious. "I'm good at charming skeptics." Ezra shook his head. "Not yet. I need to do this myself." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. The party was a bubble, a moment of grace. But he knew the real test would come later tomorrow, next week, when the world wasn't softened by wine and celebration. Ruth called them over to cut the anniversary cake, a towering creation of vanilla and rose water. Ezra and Liam joined the circle, hands brushing as they clapped along with the crowd. David raised a glass, his voice carrying over the chatter. "To 30 years of love," he said, his eyes lingering on Ezra. "And to family, in all its beautiful, messy forms." The words hit Ezra like a wave, warm and overwhelming. He glanced at Liam, whose smile was a quiet vow, and felt the courage to keep going. But as the cake was sliced and plates passed around, Joel approached, his face stern. "Ezra," he said, his voice low, "can we talk? Outside?" Ezra's heart sank, but he nodded. "Sure, Uncle Joel." He shot Liam a look, a silent plea for strength, and followed Joel to the loft's balcony, where the Chicago skyline glittered under a twilight sky. Joel leaned against the railing, his hands clasped. "I heard what you said in there," he began, his tone measured. "About you and Liam." Ezra braced himself, expecting a lecture. "Yeah, it's true." Joel nodded, his gaze distant. "I won't lie, kid. This isn't what I grew up with. It's hard for me to wrap my head around." He paused, and Ezra's chest tightened, waiting for the blow. But then Joel's expression softened. "But I saw your parents' faces. They love you. And I love you too. I just need time to understand. Ezra blinked, caught off guard. You're not mad. Joel chuckled. A rough sound. Mad. Nah. Confused. Maybe. But your family. Ezra. That doesn't change. The relief was dizzying. But Ezra knew this was just one conversation. There would be others harder ones. Maybe. He thanked Joel, his voice thick, and returned to the party, where Liam was waiting with a plate of cake and a question in his eyes. Everything okay? Liam asked, handing him a fork. For now, Ezra said, taking a bite. The sweetness grounded him, a reminder that this night, chaotic as it was his. He and Liam sat on a couch in the corner, sharing the cake, their knees touching. The letter had been a mistake, but it had also been a beginning messy, beautiful start to a life without shadows. The party wound down, the loft emptying as guests trickled out into the Chicago night. Ezra and Liam lingered, helping Ruth and David stack plates and fold tablecloths. The air felt different now, charged with the afterglow of Ezra's confession. Every glance from his parents carried a new weight, a mix of pride and curiosity, and Ezra felt both exposed and cherished. Liam's scarf was draped over a chair, his sleeves rolled up as he carried a tray of glasses to the kitchen. Ezra watched him, marveling at how easily Liam moved through the world, unapologetic and bright. The letter, now safely back in Ezra's possession, sat heavy in his pocket again, a reminder of the leap he'd taken. Ruth joined him by the window, her hands dusted with flour from packing up the cake. Ezra, she said softly, I'm so proud of you. I wish you'd told us sooner, but I understand why you didn't. Ezra's throat tightened. I wanted to. I just didn't know how. I thought it might change things. She squeezed his hand, her wedding ring cool against his skin. It does change things. It makes us closer. You don't have to hide anymore. Her words were a balm, but Ezra knew the road ahead wasn't smooth. His parents' acceptance was a foundation, but there were others in his life, friends, colleagues, the synagogue community who might not be as open. He thought of his boss, a conservative man who'd once made a snide comment about lifestyle choices. He thought of the rabbi, whose sermons on family were warm but rooted in tradition. The letter had opened a door, but what lay beyond it was uncertain. Liam appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. You two plotting something? He teased, his eyes flicking to Ezra with a warmth that made his heart skip. Just catching up, Ruth said, smiling. Liam, you're staying for coffee tomorrow, right? I want to hear all about you. Liam grinned. Only if you promise to share that cake recipe. As Ruth laughed and headed back to the kitchen, Ezra and Liam found a moment alone. The loft was quieter now, the city's hum filtering through the windows. Liam took Ezra's hand, his thumb tracing small circles. You did something incredible tonight, he said. I know it wasn't planned, but I'm so proud of you. Ezra's eyes stung. I'm still scared, he admitted. Thesusit's everything I want. But it's not just about us. It's everyone else, too. Liam nodded, his expression serious. I get it. I came out years ago, and it wasn't all smooth sailing. But you've got me, Ezra. And your parents. You're not alone in this. They stood there, hands clasped, the city skyline a backdrop to their quiet vows. Ezra felt the weight of the letter again, not as a burden, but as a bridge. He'd written it to confess his love, but it had done more. It had forced him to confront his truth, to step into it fully. The next morning, over coffee at his parents' apartment, the conversation continued. David set out mugs, his movements deliberate, as if grounding himself in routine. So, he said, sitting across from Ezra and Liam, how did you two meet? I want the real story, not the friends from theater version. Ezra laughed, the tension easing. It's not that exciting. We were both terrible at improv, so we bonded over mocking the instructor. Liam smirked. Speak for yourself. I was a natural. The banter felt normal, grounding. Ruth joined them, her eyes bright with curiosity. And the letter? She asked, her tone gentle. When did you know? Ezra. Ezra hesitated, glancing at Liam. It started slow. I didn't even realize what I was feeling until that kiss. He blushed, but Liam's smile urged him on. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The letter was my way of making it real. David nodded, his expression soft. You're brave, kiddo. Braver than I was at your age. The coffee grew cold as they talked, the conversation weaving through Ezra's fears, his hopes, and the love that had brought him here. Liam shared his own story coming out to his conservative family in Ohio, the rejection that had pushed him to Chicago, the freedom he'd found in being himself. Ezra listened, his admiration deepening. Liam's strength was a beacon, guiding him through his own uncertainty. But as they left the apartment, the real world loomed. Ezra's phone buzzed with a text from his coworker. Sarah, heard about the party. You okay? The message was kind, but it reminded him that his truth was spreading. Unstoppable now. He showed it to Liam, who squeezed his shoulder. One step at a time, Liam said. You've got this. Ezra nodded, but the fear lingered. The letter had been a mistake, but it had also been a catalyst. He was out, and there was no going back, only forward, into a life he was just beginning to imagine. Monday morning hit like a cold wave. Ezra sat at his desk in the graphic design firm, the hum of computers and chatter filling the open-plan office. His coming out at the anniversary party felt like a dream, vivid but distant, as he faced the reality of his workplace. The letter, now a cherished artifact between him and Liam, was tucked away at home, but its impact rippled here. Sarah, his coworker, stopped by his desk, her smile tentative. So, the party, she said, leaning against his cubicle. Big night. Huh? Ezra's stomach twisted. He'd known the news would spread. Chicago's Jewish community was tight-knit, and gossip traveled fast. Yeah, he said, forcing a casual tone. Big night. She nodded, her eyes kind but searching. I think it's great. Ezra. You and Liam, you seem happy. She paused, then added, not everyone's going to get it. Though. You know how some people are. Ezra's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who she meant. Their boss, Greg, was a brilliant designer but a man of rigid beliefs. Ezra had overheard him dismiss progressive nonsense during a client meeting, his tone sharp enough to sting. Coming out here, in this sleek office with its glass walls and high stakes, felt like a different kind of risk. Thanks for the heads up, Ezra said, managing a smile. Sarah squeezed his shoulder and moved on, but her warning lingered. He opened his design software, trying to focus on a logo project, but his mind drifted to Liam, to the party, to the life he was building, one he refused to hide. At lunch, Ezra met Liam at a cafe near the office, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh coffee. Liam was already there, scribbling in a notebook, his scarf a bright splash of color. He looked up as Ezra approached, his smile instant and warm. Rough morning? Liam asked, reading Ezra's face. Ezra sighed, sliding into the chair across from him. Just adjusting. People at work are starting to hear about the party. I'm not sure how it's going to go. Liam reached across the table, his hand covering Ezra's. You don't have to face it alone. If anyone gives you trouble, I'll write them a strongly worded poem. Ezra laughed, the tension easing. I'd pay to see that. He paused, his voice softening. I keep thinking about the letter. How it changed everything. I'm glad it happened, but I'm scared of what's next. Liam's eyes softened. I know. Coming out isn't a one-time thing, it's a process. But you've got a head start. Your parents, your cousin, even your grumpy, unclethy Ree on your side. That's more than a lot of people get. Ezra nodded, grateful for the reminder. They ordered sandwiches. The conversation shifting to lighter things, Liam's upcoming poetry reading, Ezra's latest design project. But as they left the cafe, Ezra's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from his rabbi. Miriam, heard about the party. Can we talk? Ezra's heart sank. Miriam had always been kind, her sermons full of compassion, but the synagogue was a cornerstone of his family's life. What if his coming out strained that connection? He showed Liam the text, his anxiety spiking. Want me to come with you? Liam offered, his tone serious. Ezra shook his head. I need to do this one alone. But, can we meet after? I might need you. Always, Liam said, pulling him into a quick hug. The embrace was brief but grounding, a reminder that Ezra wasn't navigating this alone. That evening, Ezra met Miriam at the synagogue, a modest brick building in Evanston. The sanctuary was quiet, the stained glass windows casting colorful shadows. Miriam greeted him with a warm smile, her gray hair pulled back in a bun. Ezra, she said, gesturing to a pew. I heard about your parents' anniversary. Sounds like it was quite a night. Ezra nodded, his hands clasped tightly. Yeah. I came out. By accident. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Miriam's expression was gentle, her eyes steady. I'm glad it did. Not the accident part, but the truth. You're a vital part of this community. Ezra, your honesty strengthens us. Ezra blinked, surprised. You're not upset. I know some people here are traditional. Miriam sighed, her gaze thoughtful. Some are. And there may be conversations to have, questions to answer. But our tradition is about love. Ezra, love for each other. For truth. You living your truth is a gift to us all. Her words were a lifeline, easing the fear that had knotted in his chest. They talked for an hour. About faith, identity, and the work of building bridges. When Ezra left, the night air felt cleaner, his steps lighter. He texted Liam, it went okay. Meet me at the lake. They met at Lake Michigan's edge, the water dark and restless under the stars. Liam was there, his scarf fluttering in the breeze. So, he asked, his voice soft. Ezra smiled, the weight of the day lifting. It's going to be okay. Not easy, but okay. He took Liam's hand, the letter's words echoing in his mind. I love you, Liam. I'm ready for this for us. Liam's grin was radiant. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of small victories and quiet battles. Ezra's coming out rippled through his life, reshaping relationships in ways he hadn't expected. At work, Sarah became his fiercest ally, shutting down whispers with a sharp wit that made Ezra grateful. But Greg, their boss, was colder. His feedback on Ezra's designs suddenly nitpicky, his glances heavy with unspoken judgment. Ezra confided in Liam over late-night coffee at their favorite Wicker Park diner, the same one where their first kiss had sparked everything. I don't know if he's just being a jerk or if it's about me, Ezra said, stirring his coffee absently. It's like he's waiting for me to mess up. Liam's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. He's the one messing up if he can't see how talented you are. You don't owe him anything. Ezra, keep being you. Ezra nodded, drawing strength from Liam's certainty. Their relationship was deepening, each day a new layer of trust. They spent evenings at Liam's tiny apartment, reading poetry aloud or sketching ideas for Ezra's next project. The letter, now framed on Liam's wall, was a reminder of their beginning mistake that had become a milestone. But not every moment was easy. At a family dinner, Ezra's Aunt Rachel, Joel's wife, asked pointed questions about lifestyle choices, her tone polite but sharp. Ezra answered calmly, his voice steady, but the conversation left him drained. Later, Liam held him as he vented, the weight of judgment heavy but bearable with Liam by his side. The synagogue became a surprising refuge. Miriam invited Ezra and Liam to a community discussion on inclusion, a nerve-wracking but empowering experience. Ezra spoke about his journey, his voice shaking at first but growing stronger as he saw nods of support from younger members. An older congregant, Mr. Feldman, approached afterward, his hand trembling as he shook Ezra's. "My grandson's gay," he said quietly. "Thank you for speaking up. It helps." Ezra's eyes stung as he thanked the man. The moment a reminder that his truth wasn't just his, it was part of something bigger. He and Liam left the synagogue hand in hand, the autumn air crisp and full of promise. They walked to a nearby park, where leaves crunched underfoot and the city's hum felt distant. "I didn't expect this," Ezra said, sitting on a bench beside Liam. "I thought coming out would be the end of something. But it's a beginning." Liam smiled, his scarf a bright slash against the gray sky. "It's both. End of hiding, start of living. And you're doing it, Ezra. Every day?" Ezra leaned against him, their shoulders touching. "I couldn't do it without you. That letter, it was for you. But it changed everything." Liam's laugh was soft, his hand finding Ezra's. "I'm keeping it forever. You know, it's my favorite poem." They sat there, the world quiet around them, and Ezra felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. But the calm was fleeting. A text from Greg popped up on his phone. "Need to discuss your performance. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The words were cold, professional, but Ezra felt the subtext. His job, his stability, was on the line. He showed Liam the text, his stomach churning. "This is it," he said. "He's going to make this about who I am." Liam's eyes narrowed, but his voice was steady. "Then you fight. You're not just a designer. Ezra, brilliant. He doesn't get to take that from you." Ezra nodded, the fear real but not paralyzing. The letter had taught him something. His truth was his strength. He'd faced his family, his community, and himself. Greg was just another hurdle, one he'd clear with Liam by his side. The next morning, Ezra walked into the office with his head high, his portfolio ready. Greg sat behind his desk, his expression stern, but Ezra didn't flinch. He presented his work, his voice clear, his confidence rooted in the love and support he'd found. The letter had been a mistake, but it had given him courage, a courage he carried into every corner of his life. The meeting with Greg was tense, but Ezra held his ground. He laid out his designs, each one a testament to his skill, his passion. Greg's critiques were sharp, but Ezra countered with calm precision, refusing to let his personal life be weaponized. By the end, Greg's expression had softened, not warm but professional. "Keep up the good work," he said, the words clipped but a concession. Ezra left the office feeling lighter, victorious in a small but significant way. That evening, he and Liam celebrated at a rooftop bar, the Chicago skyline glittering below. Liam raised a glass, his eyes bright. "To you," he said. "To us. To every accidental, beautiful moment." Ezra clinked his glass against Liam's, his heart full. "To the letter," he added, smiling, "and to not hiding anymore." The months that followed were a dance of growth and love. Ezra's parents invited Liam to every family gathering, their home a haven of acceptance. Maya started a group chat called Ezra's Fan Club, where she and other cousins shared memes and support. Even Joel came around, asking awkward but earnest questions about Liam's poetry, a quiet effort to understand. At work, Ezra thrived, his designs earning praise from clients. Greg never mentioned the party, but his critiques grew fairer, and Sarah whispered that he'd been impressed by Ezra's resolve. The synagogue community, too, evolved, with Miriam leading discussions on inclusion that drew younger members and challenged older ones. Ezra felt like he was part of something larger, a shift toward a world where love didn't need to hide. One crisp spring evening, Ezra and Liam returned to the diner where it all began. They sat in their old booth, the jukebox playing a soft tune. Ezra pulled out a new letter, this one shorter but no less heartfelt. "I wrote this for you," he said, sliding it across the table. Liam's eyes lit up as he read, his smile growing. The letter was simple, a promise to build a life together, to face every challenge, to love without fear. When Liam looked up, his voice was thick with emotion. "Ezra, you keep surprising me." They kissed, the diner fading around them, and Ezra knew this was his truth, not just the love he felt for Liam, but the courage to live it fully. The accidental letter had been a spark, igniting a life he'd never dared dream of. It had cost him fear, doubt, and sleepless nights, but it had given him so much more, a family that embraced him, a community that grew with him, and a love that anchored him. As they left the diner, hand in hand, the city felt alive with possibility. Ezra glanced at Liam, his scarf catching the streetlights, and felt a certainty deep in his bones. The letter had been a mistake, but it was also a miracle one that had led him here, to a life unapologetically his.